Hello, happy Wednesday evening. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Sarah Marino, and I am an Associate Organizing Director with the Indivisible team. I'm also joined by Olga Liapis-Muzzi, an Associate Organizing Director for Training, and with James Scott and Monica Lynn from Indivisible NoCo. So really excited to dive into all of this material and talk about Payback Project. So tonight we'll be going over specifically how to host a virtual People's Payback Town Hall. This training is specifically designed for folks in payback states who are participating in the first Payback Week of Action. If that doesn't apply to you, you are still absolutely welcome to join. There will be some helpful information just generally about how to plan a virtual event of different sizes. But there also may be some information, especially some of the things at the top, that isn't entirely applicable. So we wanted to be upfront about the specific focus of this training. We also won't be using this as an opportunity to share ways for groups outside of payback states to get engaged with supporting the work in payback states. So also wanted to kind of clarify that from the get-go, but we will have other opportunities for that in the future. And again, folks are welcome whether you're in a payback state or whether you're in another state and just want to learn about how to host a virtual event. So I'm here to start us off and run through some logistics and agenda for the call, and then I'll dive into an overview of Payback Project and the goals of these particular events. So first, some logistics, all of our favorite parts. Right now, everyone is muted given the attendance on the call, but you can communicate in the chat box as folks are already doing. I see Jody very enthusiastically saying, yay, Indivisible NoCo a couple of times in here. So feel free to continue chatting in the chat box. Just keep in mind, if you want to share a comment or a question with everyone on the call, make sure that you toggle to all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, it sometimes defaults to just panelists, who are those 4 speakers that we have on the call. And if you would like to ask a question that we can gather and pull up in the Q&A at the end of the call, please make sure to type in question in all caps before your question, so that we can make sure that we can capture those easily and know that it's a question for the presenters on the call. And then a couple of other notes. We are recording this webinar. I know we get that question a lot, so I want to share that on the front end. We are recording this, and then everyone who is on this call will get an email with the presentation that we're sharing and other supporting materials, including a recording of this webinar, and that will be coming in the next few days. So don't worry, you'll be getting all of this material. So in terms of agenda, in just a moment, I'm going to do an overview of the week of action and of Payback Project, just a pretty quick big picture overview. And after that, we'll hear from Olga about how to plan a virtual town hall, all the do's and don'ts, and the before, during, after, all that good stuff. And then after that, the part that I know at least Olga and I are most excited about is featuring Indivisible NoCo, who will be sharing kind of an overview and some learnings from a big virtual forum that they did a few weeks ago. At the end, we'll hopefully have time for a few questions as well, so we'll be collecting those throughout. So before we dive into the week of action details, one of my favorite parts about Indivisible calls is just seeing who we have on the call. And I know everyone has been starting to introduce themselves in the chat box, but if you haven't already, please take a moment to share your group name and your location. And then since this is specifically a payback call, we would love to hear from you what senator you're working to oust, and any fun tidbits that you might want to share about your senator. So, and I'm seeing in the chat box a question of what is a payback state? We'll get into what payback is in just a moment, but you can actually see right on the screen here the payback states specifically and who the senators are. So those are our target Senate states. But again, if you're not in a payback state, you are welcome to stay on if you want to learn how to host a virtual event. So I am seeing we got a out with Martha parentheses Dan McSally, Texas looking to take out Cornyn. There's some folks from South Carolina. Indivisible No Codes ousting Corey Gardner by Cornyn. Let's see, who else do we have? More Corey Gardner. Tennessee is doing some payback texting. Bye Lindsey Graham. Got some South Carolina. Nice. Well, feel free to continue sharing. We've got a great collection here of a lot of payback states represented, and a lot of states doing great work in their states who may not be payback states as well on the call as well. So great. Now that we've gotten through all of that kind of top of the call intro business, let's dive into Payback Project. If you're on this call, and particularly if you're planning an event for the week of action, you likely have a sense of what Payback Project is already. However, if that's not the case, no problem. We want to get everyone quickly up to speed. So to put it simply, Payback Project is our plan to take back the Senate. And instead of targeting just 1 or 2 senators, we're targeting 10 states and 11 senators. So you can learn a lot more about these senators and who they are on paybackproject.org. And so you can see them there. So we have Payback Project work organized into 3 pre-election phases. The first one is People's Payback, focused on accountability and capacity building. So that's what we're in right now. And for each of these phases, we're organizing a week of action where we'll be asking specifically groups and payback states to organize a similar type of action or a similar type of event, with a lot of flexibility though. So holding each of these actions within a defined time can help demonstrate momentum and develop a national narrative. So plus from the national level, we can more deeply support those specific events, like with this training, and with a toolkit and recruitment support. For this first phase, as I've been saying, and as many of you know, we're doing virtual People's Payback Town Halls. So those are for folks in payback states, and the week of action is July 6th through July 12th. So right after the 4th of July weekend, and also over the course of July recess as well. For these events, there are 2 main goals. One is build your group capacity, meaning bring in new members, and also use this as an opportunity to develop and strengthen leadership within your group. And 2 is to hold your senator accountable, which many of you have been doing for quite a while. So really just keep it up. So that is just a brief overview. You can also read more about the general idea of payback and the week of action on paybackproject.org/resources at the toolkits. But I am going to hand it over to Olga, who will walk us through hosting an online event.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Oh, excellent. Muting and unmuting, a big part of hosting a virtual event, as it turns out. So thank you so much, Sarah. My name is Olga Liapi-Smuzzi. I'm the Associate Organizing Director of Training here at Indivisible, and really excited to be on with all of you tonight to talk about how to plan a virtual and viral town hall. So what I'll be talking about is really what it takes to both plan and execute a virtual town hall. So that includes all the logistics that you need to think about, the agenda, recruiting people, recruiting press, what do you do day of, and what do you do as a follow-up. And a little bit about me. So I, before coming to Indivisible, worked for 10 years. I'm hearing that it's very choppy. Are other folks experiencing? Okay, I will speak slowly. And please, folks, keep the comments coming if you're also experiencing a bad sound, and lean in, and hopefully that makes a difference. Oh boy, still choppy. Sarah, are you experiencing the same
It's
thing?
a bit choppy again. It was better for a bit. Do you want to try turning off your video since you have a PowerPoint anyway?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. Nothing like learning in the real moment. Let's see. How about now?
That's
I'll go
better.
ahead and give it a try. Oh, excellent. Lots better. Okay, well, here's the first lesson, folks. Sometimes our technology fails, but we got to keep moving. So, like I said, let me tell you a little bit about myself before I get started. So, before coming to Indivisible, I worked for a labor union called the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees as both an organizer and a trainer. And through my work there, I went ahead and planned a whole lot of events, also at Ask Me and at Indivisible. And here's the good news that I want to share with everybody. It turns out that planning a virtual event, like a virtual town hall, a lot of the lessons that we learned from planning in-person events actually transfer to planning virtual events as well. And I know that a lot of you on this very call have a ton of experience planning really successful in-person events, and we're going to be able to really learn from those lessons a lot this evening. And in fact, we want to hear about what your experience has been like planning in-person town halls. So what you see on your screen right now is a poll that we'd like you to participate in. And the way to participate in the poll, the instructions are right at the top of your screen. You can either open up a brand new browser and go to pollev.com/indivisible2028, or you can text Indivisible 2028 to 22333. And then once you join, you can go ahead and give us your answer. How many in-person town halls have you planned? None, 1 to 2, 3 to 5, more than 5. And if you're having a hard time using the poll, you can always answer this question through the chat box. But let's go ahead and see how much. Oh, here we go. We've got some answers coming in. 3 to 5 in-person town halls. Let's keep the answers coming. I know we have some folks on this call with a lot of experience. All right, I see some answers coming through the chat box. That's great. We've got A. No in-person town hall experience. That's why I assume you're here. You're very welcome here. 2 candidate forums, but not a town hall. So an event experience, but not specifically town hall. And I see a bunch of other folks also saying that they're new to this exact process. So whether you're new or you're experienced, this is why we're here tonight, is to really hone in on these lessons. If you were one of the folks who said that you do have experience planning, whether it's a candidate forum or a town hall, we'd love to hear from you. What are your favorite lessons from planning in-person events? It's still the same login. Go ahead and you can go to a browser, pollev.com/indivisible2028, or you can answer via text. What are your favorite lessons from planning an in-person town hall? I'll give it a few more moments for people to answer. If I had my video on, y'all would be seeing that I am swaying in place, excited for the lessons that you all have. How about this? As folks, as all of you are answering the questions, we'll be able to come back to this poll and review some of the lessons. But how about I start sharing some of the lessons that we've learned here at Indivisible through not only planning in person, but also virtual events. Okay, so let's get started here. First is event logistics. So we suggest that you start by really asking yourself 4 initial questions when it comes to planning your virtual event. And here's the important part of this process, y'all, or one of the important parts, is we strongly suggest you do this with your planning committee. It can be a little tempting to plan events by ourselves. You know, I know there are a lot of group leaders, a lot of you out there who do such incredible work with your groups, but we know that When planning larger events, when you're doing a lot of the work by yourself, not only is that likely to cause burnout, which is something we constantly want to avoid, but we also know that events like this are a really great opportunity to develop other group members into group leaders. And so it's incredibly important that the first step you really take is bringing together a planning committee. As soon as you have that, the first question we suggest tackling is, what are your goals? So as Sarah said earlier in this presentation, the Week of Action have two primary goals. First is to hold your senator accountable and bring to light their record, but then also to provide group development opportunities for members in your Indivisible group. When you bring together your planning committee, you may find that you actually have a third, maybe even fourth goal that has to do with what's going on in your state or what's going on locally for your group. What we suggest is getting really clear on your goals before you actually go any further in planning your event. As soon as you do that, though, the next question is, what size event do you want to plan? It can be a little tempting to shoot for the stars and plan as large an event as possible. But what we've actually found is that there's a strong impact at every level of events. So you can choose to hold a smaller event, maybe 10, 15 people. You can hold a really massive event, 800, 900 people. It's really about what capacity your group has and what is the most need on the ground that you're really reacting to in this event. So, one of the questions that we asked you in the lead up to this training was to actually think about some of these prompts. And one of them was, what size event do you want to hold? So go ahead and jump in the chat box and let us know, for your Payback Project Week of Action event, what is your recruitment goal? How many people are you shooting for to attend your virtual event? I'm going to keep going as the answers come in, but please jump in the chat box, y'all. Okay, once you identify the size of your event, the next question is, when should you hold it? When should your event take place? We suggest really checking in with any potential speakers, but also thinking about what's most convenient for members of your Indivisible group and for the larger community, the community at large. This is another one of those questions that we asked you all to think about ahead of time. So go ahead, share in the chat box, when is your event taking place, if you've already gone ahead and set a date for it. Okay, again, I'm going to keep us moving. Once you've set your goals, you've thought about the size of your event, when it should take place, the next question is all about platforms. There are a lot of platforms out there for you, for all of us to choose from. Here on the screen, you have only a couple of them: BlueJeans, Zoom, Crowdcast, Microsoft Teams, Hopin, Icebreaker, Google Hangouts, lots and lots of options. The truth is, there isn't one great solution. There isn't one silver bullet, if you will. It really depends on what needs you all have in your Indivisible group and for your event. And considering all of those elements is how you can make the best choice about what product to use. But we do have a few suggested considerations as you make your platform decision. The first one is participant size and cost. Each of the products that I listed there and the many more that are available that I didn't list tend to have different levels of how many participants are allowed in your virtual event that tend to correlate with the cost. So this is really important for you to think about as it relates to how large of an event you want to have and how much of a budget you have to spend on something like a platform. The second thing to consider is audio and visual controls. Depending on the exact details of your agenda, being able to control the audio and the audio and visual of your presenters and your attendees can be very, very important. So we strongly suggest that you take that into consideration as you think about the platform you want to use. Then finally, streaming capabilities. We've been hearing from Indivisible groups across the country that you all are streaming many of the events that you're planning. This is a way to get a brand new audience beyond just the folks the attendees that sign up and attend your event. You can broadcast this through social media, through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. If you plan on doing this, make sure that you're choosing a platform that will make that task easier rather than harder. All right, I'm going to keep us moving forward. Let's see. Let's fast forward in time. You've built your organizing committee. You know what your event goals are, what size you want your event to be, when your event is taking place, what platform you're going to use. The next thing is all about recruitment. How are you going to get people in that virtual room? So we have a couple of tips related to this. First is to create a registration process that captures key information. What do I mean by that? This is a great opportunity for you to build your contact list. Anybody who registers for your event is a person you can reach out to for future events. So make sure you're thinking and building in a registration process that allows you to collect key information to be able to follow up with folks afterwards. Next, you want to create a social media presence for your event. Go ahead and use the social media platforms your group is already familiar with, whether that's Twitter, Facebook, but go ahead and create a little bit of a moment in the lead up to the event. Next, it's to register your event on the Indivisible map, including a Payback Project event issue focus. Okay, I do want to do a quick poll here. I'm curious, of those of you who are on this call tonight, how many of you have registered one of your previous events on the Indivisible map? Let's get some quick answers here. Any yeses, any nos? Yes, that's fantastic. Oh, lots of yeses. Okay, we've got one no. I was expecting it. All right, y'all, I'm gonna make a pitch for why you absolutely should register your event on the Indivisible map. There are 3 really key reasons for this. First, Indivisible National, we can help you recruit folks to your event if you put it on the Indivisible map. We're able to share that through email to other Indivisibles in your state that may not be on your group's email list. The second reason is because national news outlets can also help us recruit. They tend to go to our Indivisible map if we really have a big week of action with lots of events on there. We can garner national press via really by making sure that all the events going on across the country are actually reflected on our map. But then the third reason doesn't have to do with the execution of the week of action, but has to do with the debrief afterwards. We have better data to really debrief and understand the impact of our weeks of action from a national perspective if we really know how many events took place across the board. So for all those reasons, we definitely suggest you register your event on the Indivisible map. But the last suggestion when it comes to recruiting people has to do with directly contacting your hot leads. And by hot leads, I mean anybody who you want to ensure attends your event. You absolutely will increase the likelihood that they attend by reaching out to them directly. If you have a phone number, go ahead and call and text. If you only have email, reach out to them through email or even through Facebook or other social media platforms. Okay, that was all about recruiting people. There's one other note I actually want to make before I move on, which is that here at the Indivisible training team, we've been developing a lot of resources around recruitment because we've been hearing from groups that this is something that all of us can really benefit from, getting more people to our events. So if you're curious to find out more information on how to boost your recruitment, we actually just had a training last week on making a recruitment plan that you're very welcome to watch the recording of, or you can always check out the Indivisible Recruitment Guide. Both of the links to these resources will be sent in our follow-up email after tonight's webinar. Okay, that was the last thing I wanted to say on recruiting people. Now, let's talk about recruiting press. So the first and most basic step to recruiting press is absolutely sending out a press release about your event. As soon as you have enough details finalized about your event, you absolutely want to send a press release out. But that, it turns out, isn't the only step to really maximizing the chance that press arrive at your event. A second thing you can do is to use your press list. I'd love to hear from folks. Do you have a press list? Go ahead and jump into the chat box. If I'm using those words and you're thinking to yourself, I don't even know what that is, that's okay. essentially what you want to develop is a list of reporters who regularly report on your race and on the race going on in your state and your senator. So if you have a press list already, go ahead and use it. If you don't, read recent stories about your senator and look for the bylines, the people who've written them, to start developing the contact list of people you should be sending your press release to. Ooh, I see some people saying you do have a press list. That's great, that's great. One more tip on recruiting press: you can enlist the help of your guest speakers. Check in with any guest speakers and make them aware that media are invited, and see if they can offer any help to bring them in. Okay, speaking of guest speakers, we should talk about planning your agenda. So the first tip we have around planning your agenda is to maximize participant attention. It can be really tempting to try to create just the perfect agenda that lasts 3 hours, that covers every single piece of information. But all of us have had the experience of staring at a computer screen for too long. And the truth is that you will lose people's attention if your agenda goes longer than 90 minutes. That is the absolute max we suggest planning for. And even that, in my opinion, is just a little bit too long. 60 minutes seems to be about the sweet spot, but 90 minutes is the absolute max. Okay, number 2 on planning your agenda, you gotta build in a hook. So let's hear, this was the last question that we asked you all to think about before joining this webinar tonight. What are some of the hooks that you're thinking about for your event? I know there are some good plans that have already started. Waiting for comments to come in. What hook do you have for your event? Oh, here we go. The first face-to-face forum between candidate X and Y. So building up a little bit of a, this has never happened before. That's a great hook. Let's get one more before moving on. You all don't know this, but I'm making very direct eye contact with all of you. Here we go. I like the idea of cardboard senator that folks can quote unquote talk to. Oh yeah, I believe, as we know, we have several indivisibles from Colorado who are very familiar with this and had a ton of success of using cardboard senators, cardboard quarry. That's a great hook, fantastic example. No matter what you decide, just make sure that you're building it in and really sharing your hook as you're doing your recruitment, because that's what's going to draw people in. Okay, finally, let's talk about assigning roles. Because we are moving from an in-person event to a virtual event, the fact that you're doing your town halls virtually does mean that you have a couple roles that you wouldn't necessarily need to worry about if it was in person. The first of these is tech support. This person's responsibilities are really all of the back-end configurations. This could mean monitoring, streaming, launching polls, muting and unmuting speakers. Depending on the complexity of your agenda, it could even be good to assign multiple volunteers to doing tech support. Next is chat box monitoring. It's good to have at least one person whose whole job is monitoring the chat box. You can answer simple questions, respond to comments that are coming up, and really troubleshoot immediately if you have someone whose role is really monitoring and interacting with participants through the chat box. Next is a pretty standard one. It would happen even in an in-person event, which are your speakers and moderators. But here's the thing that's really different about being in a virtual space that all of us experience tonight. If your speaker's audio or visuals fail, it can be pretty frustrating for participants. Thank you all for staying on, even though that happened earlier. And so we really suggest troubleshooting as much of that as possible beforehand to alleviate some of those problems. And then, of course, sometimes they will still happen. Okay, 2 more roles here. Question tracker. This person's role is all about collecting questions that are coming up through the chat box or any other means, and is really important if you have a Q&A portion to your town hall. And the best way to do this is to really ensure you have a system that makes it easy for the moderator to receive those questions, rather than the moderator needing to look through a busy chat to pull any of the questions out themselves while they're also, presenting and speaking. Finally, press liaison. It's really important. Our goal is to get press to these town halls, or one of the ideals is to get press to these town halls, I should say. And it's really important to have somebody, a volunteer, whose primary focus is really being a point of contact for any press that arrive. Okay, we're going to fast forward in time again. You've done it. You've determined all your event logistics. You've been recruiting attendees. You've planned an incredible agenda, and your last few days are happening. You're 1 week away from your event going live. What should you be doing? With 1 week left, we suggest you hold a full tech rehearsal to practice the agenda and test the technology. I can't emphasize this enough. This step is incredibly important because the technology, no matter how experienced of speakers you have for your guest speakers or your panelists, the fact that you're in a virtual realm really changes the game. It's incredibly important to test the technology with all of the speakers present through a full tech rehearsal. But another thing to do that week is to confirm your attendees. We've really found that attendance is boosted significantly if folks get a final reminder the week of or the day before. Incredibly critical for maximizing your recruitment. Then, day of, what should you do? Well, for one thing, you want to ask your volunteers to arrive 30 minutes early. You want to start on time. You only have that short period of time because we already talked about maximizing participant attention. Go ahead and start on time to do that. And then finally, end your town hall, your session, by inviting attendees to your next event. I don't say this lightly, because that does mean that you need to be planning for your next event while you're planning for your virtual town hall, and that's not easy to do, but that's the best way to ensure that you're maximizing the likelihood of any brand new town hall attendees making their way to future events and really, ideally, participating in your group fully after your town hall. So even though it takes some work, we suggest getting at least the basics of your next event planned so that you can maximize the attention of the attendees you have during your town hall. Okay, it happened. Congratulations. In this future world, you have done all the incredible work. Your event was a huge success. There was press there. There were lots of social media mentions. It was an astounding success. What should you do as a follow-up? Except for maybe take a nap, a well-deserved rest period. We also have a couple other follow-up tips. First, you want to send a thank you email to your attendees, letting them know of any future events like we mentioned before, but also sharing with them any of the materials that you reviewed during your town hall. Then you want to thank your speakers and volunteers. It was a group effort to make it happen. It's really important to continue building that camaraderie and really taking the time to thank the speakers and fellow group members, group leaders who made it happen. Next, you want to follow up individually with new attendees. Again, one of our goals is to build the capacity of your group, and the best way to do that is to ensure that you're following up with any brand new person who attended the town hall. And to do that successfully, that's why we mentioned the registration process is so important, so you can collect the information of any new attendees who joined you. And then finally, send a press release after your event. This doesn't matter. I should say, even if press don't attend, it's incredibly important to send this press release. So whether a press attend or not, go ahead and send a package afterwards that includes some highlights, any snapshots. Maybe you took a screenshot that essentially acts as photos, getting quotes from guest speakers, transcribe any testimonials. One long email that includes all of these different elements is just fine, but you want to send a press release afterwards. Whew, that was a lot of information. And without further further ado, one of the best ways to learn is just to hear really directly from other folks who have done this work. And without any further ado, I want to hand it over to Monica Lynn and James Scott from Indivisible NOCO, who have a lot of experience doing this.
Hi, James, are you going to share your screen?
I think Olga is going to advance to our slides.
Fantastic. Okay, well, hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Olga, that was great. Made me wish that we had done some of the things that you were talking about. I'm Monica Lynn, I'm with Indivisible NOCO, and I'm joined with two of my colleagues in this adventure, James Scott and Reed Hayhow, who were, us along with some other folks we put on an online Senate candidate forum that we're going to talk about. Olga, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So just real briefly, what is Indivisible NOCO? So we formed in 2016 in the days after the election, actually in the hours after the election, I should say. We have about half a dozen board members, depending on family work obligations, and we meet weekly to plan events. As one of our members says, we have some strategic planning walks on our board, and so we had a strategic plan, and we have a strategic plan that helps us decide what we're going to be doing. It's hard to say exactly how many members we have. We have about 50 people who show up regularly to events and meetings, but we do reach over 700 people on our mailing list. We've got over 1,000 folks on our Facebook group, and for whatever it's worth, I'm not sure what this means, but we have over 1,600 Twitter followers. So we have had experience with large events. Our first one was in 2017, was a town hall without Cory Gardner, and which we definitely recruited some members, including James Scott. And it was large. We filled up a whole church, standing room only. Since then, we've had a number of rallies, a couple of rallies. We've had, over 1,000 people. One, we had almost 2,500. And we posted online, in-person candidate forums in the 2018 midterm election. Again, very large events, filled high school auditorium to capacity. The point, as Olga mentioned earlier, these were all in person. And we were going to, you go to the next slide. We were going to, because we had a strategic plan, and we were going to hold a Senate candidate forum for our members so that they could get to know the candidates and decide who to vote for. And we started planning this last November, and we kept running into logistical problems. There were like 10 people on the ballot, coming and going depending on whose petitions were approved by whom and stuff like that. And we were trying to find a time that everybody could attend and we could find a location. And then COVID hit. And so we thought, okay, this is kind of an opportunity in a weird way. And because we could do this online, and so we don't have to pay for or find a location. And time is being freed up because all these candidates aren't going to all these events. So we just jumped on it, and we ended up hosting an online forum. By the time that we hosted it, there were only 2 folks left. You might recognize one of them, who was one of the more dynamic members of the presidential debate stage in the early October. Anyway, it was a success. We reached at least 800 attendees during the events. And then afterwards, we had thousands of social media impressions. The video was shared over and over. We had press coverage, or media coverage, I should say, in the Denver Post, the Colorado Public Radio, Colorado Sun, a statewide paper, the Colorado Springs Gazette, a fairly conservative paper, and many more. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to James, who is going to talk about, what helped make our event successful and what lessons did we learn, because there were definitely things that we would do differently next time.
Absolutely. So the number one factor that contributed to our success, I think, is commitment. We were determined to make something happen, and after, as Monica was saying, trying and failing, frankly, a few times to get an in-person event organized when the field was broader, we didn't give up. And I'll say that if we can do it, you can do it. None of us are professional event organizers or were, even particularly politically active prior to 2016. So it's not as though we're, extremely well connected in political circles or anything like that. It's really the commitment to making it happen is the number one factor in the success. Obviously, having a plan that said that we knew how important the Senate race was going to be, and we knew we wanted to be a factor in the outcome there. So that guided our efforts. We knew from 2019 and before that we would be focused on this Senate race this year. So there wasn't any question about where we were going to put our efforts. It made absolute sense for us to do an event like that. So I'd encourage you to within your organization think about where you can make the most impact or have the most effect, and focus on that. We know that there are a million important problems. We're not going to be able to solve all of them, especially all at once. So pick a problem, pick a focus area, and stick to it. Make an impact there. In terms of making this event happen, I want to reiterate some things that Olga and Sarah and Monica said about the technology platform. We use the Zoom webinar, which is the same platform that we're using right now. We found that was a good mix of features and control that allowed us to make sure that the event ran smoothly and that it didn't sort of devolve into us trying to make sure everybody was muted or had their cameras off or anything like that. The Q&A channel was also very helpful during the event, so we could tell people. We didn't actually open the chat to the audience. We reserved the chat for just the panelists, and we just opened the Q&A channel to the audience, and we had them funnel their questions through that. So that allowed us to keep better control over the flow of questions and keep track of which ones we were going to answer and which ones we had deferred or declined. It also automates some things like the pre-event reminders and the post-event email that Olga mentioned. So as long as you compose what you want to say, it will take care of emailing all of the attendees, both either a day or an hour or both before the event to remind them to come, and also as a follow-up. So having all of those tools made it much easier for us to get the most out of the event. The downside is it's not free, and it's not even particularly cheap. So I think we spent about $450 for the license to cover the number of attendees that we had, which was about 800. Our license was for up to 1,000 attendees. So there are other tools out there, and you can certainly make something happen with one of those. But we had a good experience with the Zoom webinar tool. Requiring registration is important, and number one, it lets you know how many people are going to come. Right. So are you going to have 100 people show up or 1,000? And that's going to give you some sense of the challenge that you're going to be up against when you're managing the audience. Right. You can also use referral codes to track which of your promotion efforts is most effective. So we ended up generating distinct URLs. We'd use one referral code for our Twitter stream. We used another referral code for our newsletter. Indivisible National did an email blast to all of the members in Colorado. We gave them a distinct URL, so we could see which of these promotion efforts was having an effect, and that's very handy for future events. Right, we know that we're going to do certain promotion events again or efforts again, and maybe not do some others. Planning, and more planning, right? So this is the 6P principle at work. Getting very detailed in the planning, having a detailed agenda, running through it, inviting, if you have attendees from outside your organization, making sure you invite them to your preparation sessions. So we actually had the staff, the candidate staff, attend these pre-event preparation sessions, so they knew what to expect. They were familiar with the technology, and they could pass that along to their candidate. So that, and we learned things from that. We learned that we had to figure out exactly how we were going to do Q&A and a couple other things. So that experience counts for all of this stuff, and preparing with your principals or with your candidates or whomever you're going to invite. Other preparation steps we took, so we actually provided the questions to the candidates ahead of time. We also had a moderator from outside the organization who was, he's a candidate for district attorney here, and he's fabulous. He's a trial lawyer, so he was very comfortable moderating that situation, but it also gave us an opportunity to boost his candidacy. This is a Democrat running for DA, kind of an unusual thing, and we want to help him. So looking for those synergies, like what else can you do, or how else can you help people from outside the organization or other candidates when you're organizing with this. From a promotion point of view, we did most of the things that Olga and Sarah ran through, right? So we had a press or media release, as I saw in the chat, right? So we drafted media release and we released that in the week before the event. That actually generated some pre-event mentions in the state political press, so that was good. We used all of our social media channels to promote, and we also recruited our members to help us promote. So we kind of teased it to our members a day or two in advance, and we said, at 10 a.m. on Tuesday or whenever it was, we're going to have an announcement, and we need you to help us get the word out. So they were able to help us amplify the message there, and that helped us reach a broader audience. We also looked to our other Indivisible organizations in Colorado, since this was a statewide event, asked them to recruit their members to come. The national email blast that National sent to the Colorado members was actually quite effective. About half of our attendees came from that one promotion effort. So Jody, thank you again for orchestrating that. That was extraordinarily helpful for us. During the event, we had defined roles for our production team. So all three of us, plus one other member who's not here tonight, Monica Murphy, were involved in the production. We all had assigned roles. Monica was our MC. I was kind of overseeing technology. Reed was watching the Q&A channel and timing. Reed was timing, and then Melissa was watching the Q&A channel. So and we practiced all those roles before. So knowing the roles, making sure that everybody knew how to execute during the event was extremely important. We also did some amplification during the event. We did a live stream on Facebook simultaneously with our Zoom webinar, and that's another feature of the Zoom webinar. You can tie it straight to Facebook, and then we recorded it and posted it on YouTube afterward. So, not just the event, but think about how you might use that content that you're generating post the event. So I know that's a lot of lessons learned, and the other thing I'll throw in here is have a session like this after the event. Get your members together and talk about what went well and what didn't. Write all that down so you can learn from it and use it for your next event. So let's talk about Reed, unless you have anything you want to throw in, or Monica. Let's talk about what we might do differently. So speaking of posting things online, consider how people might use or misuse your materials. So in our case, the candidates were answering questions, and we had a candidate who, despite our best efforts, kind of stumbled on a couple of questions. So sure enough, right, those were the moments that got the most play on social media after the event. And you can't really control what a candidate is or is not going to say during your event, but think about when you're creating something like this and putting it in the public, people are going to use it for purposes that maybe you don't foresee. So think about that and maybe be a little bit circumspect about what you're posting online. We also found out a little too late that the Zoom webinar supports a secondary audio program, basically. So we could have had a Spanish language interpreter, or we could have invited a sign language interpreter to be on video for the event. And we regret that we didn't know about that or think about that farther in advance. And of course, you can also have somebody doing basically live transcription or closed captioning in the chat log or something else to translate for people with hearing deficiencies. Particular to the candidate forum, we gave them 2 minutes to answer every question. That turned out to be a really long time. So in the interest of keeping the event snappy and getting people in and out, we probably would have allowed less time for answers on average. On that note, we did notice that our attendance peaked about half an hour into the event and kind of dropped off from there. So by the, ours ran for about a total of an hour and 15 minutes. And by the end, we were maybe down to 50% of our peak participation. So people's attention really does fall off after that, hour mark. So keeping it short and snappy is an excellent idea. We also probably would have allowed more time for audience questions. I should say that we solicited questions from our members in advance of the event. So we were able to sort of think about those and format them, and that allowed us to feed questions to the candidates while we were taking and workshopping things out of the Q&A channel in the event. But with that many people, we had 800 people at the event, we got a lot of questions. We probably should have reserved more time for that. And on that point, the Q&A channel was open for audience comment, basically, so people could all see the questions that were being asked and kind of comment on them. And if there's a way to limit that to just the panelists seeing those questions, we probably would have done that. Few things to improve on the next time we do something like this, but overall it was a great experience. We were absolutely thrilled with the outcome. So Monica, Reed, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just one quick thing on the shorter answers. Part of the timing issue was as indicated earlier, we actually have hosted in-person debates and forums. In those situations, I think the timing was more like 5 minutes. But what you have to realize is, in this online context, as Olga was hinting, you got to be snappier, you got to be faster, you got to keep people hooked and involved. So 2 minutes is an eternity when you're in a Zoom meeting. So keeping it shorter, forcing the candidates to be snappy is really important.
Absolutely. And if there's anything else we can help you with or answer for you, here's how to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you.
And somebody asked a question about how we handle the misuse of online materials or clips. We didn't.
Well,
but we have ideas.
Go ahead, Reed.
Well, no, we just talked about trademarking. Go ahead, Reed.
Yeah. So really, the main thing that we investigated was looking at copywriting, and unfortunately, copywriting protects the whole recording, but it does not prevent people from taking short snippets, and those short snippets, in certain cases, can be damaging. So maybe one thing to consider is if somebody does a really has a bad gaffe or an epic fail, maybe you choose not to post that and not make it available, and just be aware of the trade-offs.
Right, and yeah, practically any clip is going to fall under fair use, and this is you may be familiar with the Streisand effect, right? Where trying to get something taken down can often generate more attention to it than it would if you just let it go. So, personally, we can't control what the candidates are going to say, and if a candidate doesn't want to be caught saying stupid stuff in public, then they shouldn't say stupid stuff in public. And there's not much we can do about that. So we just kind of let it roll, and there was a little bit of a wave, but it's died down, right? We'll see what happens with the general, but that's where we are right now.
So there's a question about new attendees, and were we just seeing kind of the usual suspects that we were seeing at our normal meetings? Given the overall turnout that we had, plus the Facebook views, I think it's very fair to say that we went well beyond kind of our normal viewership. I don't know that we were able to do any sort of analytics to see where the viewers were coming in from, but it definitely was larger.
Yeah, we didn't watch that against our mailing list, right? So we don't know, how many people who aren't on our mailing list, let's say, came to the event. But what I would suggest is that's when using those other promotion outlets that aren't your mailing list can help you recruit people who haven't come to your events. So find other
members.
Right, and we did get a bump in subscriptions to the newsletter. We did get a bump in people in our Facebook discussion group. We got a bump in our Twitter followers following this. So we know we recruited some new people to the network. But yeah, I would say that the best way to break out of talking to the same people is find another aligned organization to help you promote. If you're doing a state level event, then find other Indivisible organizations in your state and say, hey, we'd love to help you promote this, or we'd love it if you helped us promote this to your members. So that's breaking out of those usual patterns, and if you have a good hook, as we said earlier, this was the first time these two candidates, Andrew Romanoff and John Hickenlooper, had appeared together this election cycle. So that generated quite a bit of interest and attention. People wanted to see them together. So that definitely helps. So if you can find a hook and help and recruit other organizations to help you promote it, would be the best way to get in front of different people. And I see the question here about, did we make any special efforts to get young people to come? Frankly, no. And this is a continuing challenge for us. The under 40 set, which is, I think, a pretty broad definition of young people, getting them engaged consistently has been challenging for us.
I think the single biggest thing that we did to kind of try to get people engaged was really reach out on all the different social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, email. But even then, it's hard to know how successful we were.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Monica, James, Reed, thank you so much. This has been incredibly helpful. And also thank you for doing my job of moderating the Q&A for me. That was great. We're on an incredible roll there. So I will say a few things quickly. First of all, going back to what Olga was saying earlier on one of the first steps being to pick your scale of an event, of how big you're going to do. This was a pretty big scale event that clearly Indivisible NoCo put a ton of time and planning into. So some folks on the call may opt to do events like this. Others may go for a smaller scale event, and those are all great. But this is kind of, if you're looking for that really kind of gold or platinum level event, some good tips for how to have a really, really big successful event. Again, thank you to James, Reed, Monica for joining. And what many of you on the call don't know is that James and Monica were also a huge help in letting Olga and I pick their brains. So a lot of this content that we shared even before they were highlighted also came from a conversation that we had with the two of them and from the learnings of Indivisible NoCo. So I am going to go through a couple of quick resources available and next steps, and we might have a chance for just one or two more questions. But before we do that, we have a quick poll to hear how ready do you feel to start or continue planning your virtual town hall. So once again, you can go to pollev.com/indivisible2028 and you can select one of these little smiley faces. I think it goes from feeling not so good to feeling really, really good. I think the green guy on the right there looks a little bit nauseous to me, but I think he's actually just really, really excited and eager to plan a town hall. He or she or they. I shouldn't have assumed that the smiley face was a he.
And we even have some answers coming in. We've got 3 answers who are all in the green zone.
Woo! All right, that's awesome. Christy says, I'm the lime green, not the far right green. We don't want anyone to go too far right here. We usually like to stay to the left. Okay, so if you were in that lime green or further left, if you were going over into any of that red territory, or even if you are feeling really good, we just wanted to quickly share some additional resources and support. So number one, your Indivisible organizer. If you haven't worked with your Indivisible organizer, Indivisible organizers are amazing. They are really skilled organizers. They can help walk you through how to plan an event. They are really great at hosting online events. They can troubleshoot with you. They can help you figure out, if you don't have a press list, for example, reach out to them. They can help connect with our press team. If you just want someone to share an idea with or bounce things off, check in with your Indivisible organizer. And then 2, we also have a toolkit, which we will be sending out, and it's available on the Payback Project website. We'll have some templates. We're planning to have a media release template, and we'll have some sample town hall questions. And then finally, if you don't have Zoom or just want to talk through virtual platforms, we do have some availability to help you set up a Zoom call and to help you get access there. So you can reach out to your Indivisible organizer, and depending on what you need, we can figure out if we can help with that. So we want to be there to support you all as you start planning these events, and be able to really make the most of this first payback week of action. Finally, as I said, Indivisible NoCo, the amazing group that they are, really tackled my job here of moderating the Q&A. I think they got through most of the great questions that folks had. So the one thing that I saw that I wanted to address, not related to that event, was the online space. So we had talked on the first payback call about potentially setting up a community space for Indivisible leaders who are in payback groups, and we are working on that, just getting it set up to make sure that it could be a good space. And so we will be following up with those of you who are in payback states about that in the short term. Other than that, I think we will close on the Q&A, since we already got through most of the questions, unless anything else urgent has popped up in the chat box, which I am not seeing. And we are already a few minutes over, so I want to respect everyone's time. But thank you so much once again to Indivisible NoCo. Thank you to Olga for being an amazing trainer as always. And thank you to all of you for joining and spending your Wednesday evening with us, and for the work that you all are doing. We will again be sending out an email with all of these resources. And please don't forget to register your event on the Indivisible website on the map under Payback Project, so that we can help push out your event. We're planning to send out a recruitment email on Sunday. So if you get your event registered by Saturday, we'll be able to help push it out to folks in your area. So thank you all, and we will talk to you soon. Have a good night.